Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into some really fascinating source material. We're looking at these rapid church planting movements.
That's right.
These sources, they kind of pull back the curtain on specific stories, specific principles. We've got excerpts, profiles of people who've seen, well, incredible multiplication, both recently in South Asia and looking back historically, too.
Yeah, what these sources give us is it's a close look at some remarkable people,
Yeah.
and their approaches to mission work. The focus is really on scaling impact, mobilizing lots of people fast.
Right.
Think of it like exploring how faith spreads exponentially. Sometimes it really challenges the traditional ways of thinking. We're basically distilling the core mechanics that are presented in these specific texts.
So our mission here is pretty simple. We want to unpack the key insights, the surprising details from these sources so you can quickly get a handle on what drives these multiplying movements. Think of it as your shortcut to being well-informed on what these materials actually show.
And just to be clear, yeah, everything we talk about today, it's drawn straight from the excerpts and profiles we were given for this deep dive. We're sticking to the material.
Okay, great. Let's dive in then. Let's start with one of the main figures highlighted, Nathan Shank. The material kind of sets the scene with his family history, right? Deep roots in missionary work.
Oh, yeah. Generations. India, Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
His grandparents, great-grandparents, they were serving on the India-Nepal border way back, British colonial times. It's quite a legacy.
A legacy that definitely loomed large. The sources describe this really intense moment. 1996, he's at the bedside of his grandfather, Sam Bechtel, who's dying.
Right.
And after his grandfather passes, his grandmother looks right at Nathan and says, well, first, the material points out Nathan at this time is, young, drifting from faith, disconnected, looking for the next party, basically.
Not exactly primed for a spiritual calling at that point.
Not at all. And his grandmother looks at him and just lays it on him. The burden has passed to you.
Wow. Talk about pressure. Especially given where he was at.
Yeah, the source says those words didn't immediately, click with him right then, but they stuck, And what's powerful is how the material connects that moment to this huge shift. It says within 12 months of that challenge, he'd returned to faith.
That's quite a turnaround.
Yeah.
And the sources mentioned his specific call came through a passage in 2 Timothy 4 about preaching the word, being prepared, patience. That scripture really seemed to anchor him, according to the material.
So, okay, he's got the sense of calling. He has an education degree. He applies to a mission agency, lands in Nepal, August 2000.
Right. Jumps right into language study, field work. Starts out as an evangelist, disciple maker, church planter himself.
And he actually saw some results pretty quick, didn't he?
Yeah. The sources say within 2 years, working with a couple of partners, they planted 3 churches, which, by many standards, that's pretty solid progress.
And here's the turn in the story, right? According to the sources, despite that success, Nathan felt this, deep despair. He looked at the scale of the need. North India, Nepal, millions and millions of people, and compared it to their output, the 3 churches. And he just felt tiny. The source quotes him saying he felt he'd never get the job done at that rate.
That feeling, that realization, is presented as a major turning point.
Uh-huh.
While he was in Nepal, he met Kari, they got married, went off to seminary together, finished in 2005.
Uh-huh.
But the sources stress that all through seminary, that gap, that huge gap between the need and what he felt he could actually do, it just kept weighing on him. He knew his approach wasn't going to cut it, not for the scale of the challenge.
And when he came back to South Asia after seminary, the material says God kind of blew up his vision even bigger. Not just Nepal, but the whole North Indian Hindi-speaking belt, plus Bhutan. We're talking over 400 million people.
Which, only made that contrast sharper.
Yeah.
Right, between the massive task and his previous methods.
Yeah. And this leads straight into what the source calls his crucial insight. Looking back, Nathan felt that he himself had kind of been the biggest barrier.
How so?
Well, he realized he'd put too much confidence in his own skills, his own abilities. And doing that has sort of blinded him to God's power, but also, and this is key, the potential that God had already put into the local disciples.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't about working harder, but working smarter. Or maybe differently.
Exactly. It wasn't a lack of effort, it was a misplaced focus. The material makes this point really strongly. He realized he wasn't the key player for reaching this massive region. His ministry, his way of doing things, it kind of had to die, like that seed analogy,
The kernel of wheat idea.
Right, for the real fruit to show up. The vision was right, but it wasn't about his performance. It was about God working through, ordinary believers.
That's a fundamental shift. The sources show he had to move away from relying on his own efforts, his schedule, his personal scorecard, basically. He saw that he, or even a team of outsiders, was just never going to be enough for a task that huge.
And what I found really striking in the material is how this pushed him to, re-examine Jesus's ministry, especially in Mark's gospel.
What did he find there?
He started focusing on the private stuff Jesus did, the time spent intentionally training the disciples, on the road, pulling them aside, explaining things, Gethsemane. He began to see Jesus primarily as a movement pioneer and his core strategy, empowering his followers.
That makes sense. So less focus on the public miracles, more on the behind-the-scenes training.
Yeah. And according to the sources, that totally reshaped his thinking. He decided he needed to mirror that. He started seeing God's people, meaning all believers, not just the pros, as the actual key.
And that meant challenging the old rules, right? The sort of, well, only ordained people can do this and only trained missionaries can do that.
Exactly. Who can evangelize, who can baptize, who can make disciples, who can plant churches. He started pushing back on those limitations.
The contrast the sources draw is pretty stark. If your vision is just one church a year, maybe your old model works fine with paid staff.
Right. But if the vision is for, say, 1,000 churches a year,
then you have to mobilize everybody. You have to give ordinary believers real responsibility, real authority. It's the only way.
And the sources suggest this gave Nathan this real sense of urgency, faith, willingness to take risks. Just release ordinary people, equip them simply, send them out. Let them spread the gospel, make disciples, multiply churches.
It sounds like you got some practical advice on how to do that, too, from someone named Jeff Sundell.
Yeah, the material mentions this challenge from Sundell. Basically, shift your focus, train as many as you can, maybe 500 a year, then figure out who's actually faithful and fruitful, maybe 8–10% of them.
Okay.
Train those people to train others. And then really invest heavily in just a handful, maybe 5 of the best, mentor them intensively, 60–90 days a year.
So it's like a filtering and focusing process.
Exactly. And the sources say this just completely flipped Nathan's job description. It wasn't about him planting anymore. He became an equipper. His main job was putting simple, reproducible tools into the hands of ordinary disciples and sending them out.
Simple tools, like those 5 parts the material mentions.
Yeah, that became central. He trained people in these 5 things. 1, how to enter a new place, connect with lost people. 2, how to share the gospel simply. 3, how to make disciples when people say yes, train them. 4, how to form churches, gather believers into new communities. And 5, how to multiply workers, train others to do it all.
So enter, gospel, disciples, church, multiply.
Right. And the goal, the sources say, was for every single disciple to know how to do those 5 things.
And as he started doing this training, he naturally found people who really got it right, who started running with it.
Yeah.
Like Lipok.
Oh, Lipok's story is, wow, it's quite something. The sources say he's Naga from northeast India, strong Christian region, actually.
But he had struggles.
Big time. Drug addiction.
Yeah.
His parents even sent him to Bible college hoping it would help, but the material says he graduated in 1990 with a theology degree and a heroin addiction.
That's rough. And didn't he get involved with rebels?
Yeah, fighting for independence from India and Burma. Rose up the ranks, became a captain, even assistant to the Naga prime minister in exile, according to the sources.
But the addiction got worse.
Yeah, especially in Burma, where opium was easy to get. Eventually, the Indian authorities arrested him for his rebel activities, threw him in prison.
So prison was the turning point.
It seems like it. The sources say he got really weary of the addiction, disillusioned with the whole rebel cause. He wanted to go back to his faith, but just felt trapped, couldn't break free.
What finally did it?
The shock, the sources say, was hearing his father had died. His dad had apparently never stopped hoping for him. That loss just broke something in him. He decided right then he had to get right with God.
And he realized his Bible college degree wasn't enough.
Right. He knew he needed a real personal encounter with God's forgiveness. So he joined a YWAM youth with a mission discipleship training in 2002. The sources say that's where God really healed him, forgave those lost years.
Okay, so he's healed, restored. Then what?
Then God calls him back to Burma, the sources say, to share the gospel with his old rebel buddies. And some actually came to Christ. And while he was near the border, he became aware of this people group, the Mising, in Assam. They live along the Brahmaputra River in these houses on stilts, because of floods and animals.
Ugh.
The river's holy to them.
And God told him to reach them.
That's what the sources say. God specifically challenged him. So he started connecting, sharing the gospel. Got his first Mising baptism in August 2003. planted 3 new churches among them.
So some initial success again, but he hit a wall.
Yeah, same kind of challenge Nathan faced, but different context. The only church model Lipok knew was the traditional one from back home, church building.
Right.
And he just couldn't build buildings fast enough to reach all the macing. He wanted multiplication, but didn't know how to get it.
And that's where he connects with Nathan Shank's ideas.
Precisely. July 2006, Lipok goes to a training on church planting movements, and the sources say that's where it clicked. He grasped the importance of mobilizing the new believers themselves, like Jesus sending the Samaritan woman back to her own town.
And he teamed up with Nathan.
Immediately, they started training disciples together, specifically for multiplication, traveling together, living together, really trying to accelerate things.
Now, Lipok had a team already, right? Paid workers.
Yeah, the sources mentioned 30 paid frontline evangelists. Their job was basically win people, bring them to the existing 3 churches.
Which sounds okay, but Nathan saw a problem.
Yeah, Nathan challenged it right away, called it a bottleneck. Because they were paying people to do what, in a movement, every believer should be trained and empowered for.
So Lipok's question was,
Okay, then what should these 30 guys be doing? And Nathan helped him see their new role, become equippers, train the new disciples to reach their friends and family.
that's a big shift. From doing the work to equipping others. Did that involve the authority issue too? Like baptism?
Huge piece. The material says Lipok got really convinced from reading the New Testament that every disciple has the authority to baptize and celebrate the Lord's Supper.
Which is pretty radical in some traditions.
Definitely. But giving them that authority, it fundamentally changed how they saw themselves, right? They weren't just converts, they were fully empowered ministers. The sources argued this theological shift was crucial. It redefined his workers from just evangelists to church planters.
So Lipok changes his whole approach, starts training every disciple, mostly simple farmers, to share, make disciples, plant churches in their own networks.
And the result?
Immediate multiplication, the sources say. Exponential. New churches popping up everywhere. Mising, Nepalis, Advashi, Chakma people. Those 3 churches he started became 60 churches by the end of 2006.
60 in just a few months.
Yeah. And the material mentions one local worker in his network, just one guy, was responsible for like 300 churches starting from his efforts.
That's incredible scale.
And remember Jeff Sundell. He came back in 2007, the sources say, and had this vision, Holy Spirit rolling down the Brahmaputra, 10,000 churches emerging.
And Lipok thinks they hit that.
According to the sources, Lipok believes they reached that 10,000 new church goal by the end of 2014. And now he's focusing on other unreached groups. His story is just this powerful example of shifting from professionals to empowering everybody.
Okay, let's pivot to another story from the sources. Kumar. Very different background.
Totally different. High-caste Hindu family, temple builders in North India. But hardship hit early. Father died when Kumar was 2.
Right. His older brothers went to an orphanage. His mom worked as a day laborer. Tough start.
Yeah. And the sources say at age 8, he was desperate for education, went to a local Christian school, got a scholarship, but had to work their laundry, cooking to pay his way.
But he still had his Hindu duties.
Yeah. As the eldest son left at home, he had to perform priestly duties at the temple. 8 hours every Friday, prayer, meditation, blessing people. But the sources say inside, he had no peace, just wrestling with, how do I get to heaven?
And he had some visions.
Yes. The material describes a couple. First, he felt the God of gods would come to him. Later, he saw a picture of Jesus, bought it, started praying to it privately.
Then another vision.
At 14, yeah. Angels, heaven, day of judgment. Scared him deeply. He saw Jesus, but felt totally unworthy. He was really torn, loyalty to his mom, tradition, versus this pull towards Jesus.
When did he finally make the break?
At 17, the sources say. Decided to become a disciple of Jesus, went for baptism. And that same day, his mother told him to leave home, never come back.
Wow.
So 18, homeless, but he finished high school.
Yeah. Started tutoring math to survive and pay for college. And he was apparently really good at it. Demand exploded. He ended up setting up a boarding house for 90 students while he was still studying full-time himself.
That's entrepreneurial. And he was planting churches, too, during vacations.
Yeah, going out to West Bengal, Sikkim. Planting churches the traditional way he knew. Gather some believers, then build a building.
And he had a big goal.
A huge goal before God. 100 new churches by 2020. So how was he doing by 2007 when he met Nathan?
He'd planted 11 churches, which, again, sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, respectable.
But the sources say Kumar was devastated. He did the math. 11 down, 89 to go in 13 years. His current pace, building buildings, needing time and money, it wasn't going to happen. He was crushed.
What did he do?
Fell into this intense 2-month period of prayer, the sources say. Bitter tears. Asking God, either release me from this promise or show me how.
And right then,
Right at the end of that prayer time, Nathan Shank comes to town. July 2007, doing a CPM training. Kumar's super busy with his students, can only make it to one session.
just 1 hour.
1 hour. But the sources say it's totally transformative. Nathan summarized those 5 parts: entry, gospel, disciples, churches, multiplication.
And what clicked for Kumar?
He instantly saw what was missing. He knew how to find people, share the gospel, gather them, but he wasn't training the new believers to make disciples themselves.
So his churches were dependent on him. Passive.
Exactly. He realized that was the bottleneck. True multiplication needed him to disciple new believers from day one, to share their faith, make disciples, form new churches in their own networks. Suddenly, 100 churches didn't seem impossible anymore.
So what did he do? Change things immediately.
Right away, according to the sources. Started training his new believers. Told them, stop bringing people to my house. Meet in your home. Better yet, start a church in their home. But there was still that authority issue, right? Even for him. Yes. The sources point this out as his last big hurdle, rooted in his background, his tradition. As he started empowering people, Nathan talked about releasing full authority baptism, Lord's Supper.
And Kumar balked.
Initially, yeah, he drew the line, convinced that was clergy-only stuff. It shows how deep that thinking goes.
So how did he get past it?
The sources say Nathan just patiently walked him through the scriptures, showed him how the Great Commission gives authority to all believers. Go, make disciples, baptize. And Kumar agreed. Scripture had to trump tradition.
And this is where the story of Israel comes in.
Yeah, it's such a powerful illustration in the sources. Israel, one of Kumar's disciples, illiterate street sweeper, very low caste, but proud of his work, won awards for it.
How did Kumar train him if he couldn't read?
Kumar trained him to share his faith, and Israel's 12-year-old daughter helped him memorize Bible stories. That was his toolkit for sharing the gospel and training others.
Amazing. And Israel wanted to learn to read.
Deeply. The sources paint this picture of him swallowing his pride, going to his daughter's Hindi tutoring class. At first, he just stood outside listening. Then the tutor invited him in with the kids.
So Israel, despite his background, he'd already do a lot.
Oh, yeah. Connect with people, find receptive homes, share clearly, disciple others. Kumar built on that, trained him in planting churches, baptizing.
And then came the test.
Kind of. The sources tell about Kumar going with Israel to a new community where Israel had led someone to Christ. Kumar challenges Israel. You baptize him.
How did Israel react?
Reluctant at first, the material says. But he agreed. They found a pond, and Israel performed his first baptism. Kumar just watching.
What was the impact?
Huge. Especially on Israel's elderly father. When he heard that his son, the street sweeper, low caste, had been honored with the responsibility of baptizing someone, the sources say he just wept. It completely changed how he saw his son.
And it changed Kumar, too.
That sealed it for Kumar, the sources say. Seeing Israel fully empowered, he became totally convinced he had to let go, empower the street sweepers and rickshaw drivers. Everyone.
And the results for Kumar's goal.
Extraordinary. August 31st, 2008, he hits his goal of 100 new churches. Wait, 2008, not 2020.
12 years early, blew past the goal.
Incredible. What did he do then?
His immediate response, according to the sources, ask God, okay, what's next? The answer, train the 100 churches to plant 3 churches each.
Multiplication of the multiplication.
Exactly. So he trained the leaders, they trained their people, some planted 5, some none, you know how it goes. But by early 2009, those 100 churches became 422. Then he trained the leaders of the 422 to plant 3 more each. And the sources say it just keeps going, multiplying way beyond that initial 10,000 church vision even.
And the sources put this in context, right? The need in India.
Yeah, reminding us. Over 600,000 villages in India, 420,000 with no evangelical presence at all. The material points to Nathan, Kumar, Lipok using these keys. Simple training, empowering everybody, leadership at every level to tackle that immense scale.
Their stories are so different, but they all land in the same place, don't they? Empowering ordinary believers is the key.
It really seems to be the core principle. And the sources don't just leave it there in modern times. They draw this fascinating parallel back in history.
To William Taylor, described as this major figure in spreading Methodism globally, second half of the 19th century.
His background sounds pretty similar in spirit, actually. Father and evangelist, Taylor converted at a camp meeting.
And started street preaching almost immediately. The material says he was a junior preacher at 21, then 1849 missionary to the California gold fields, right in the thick of it.
And totally unconventional, right?
Yeah. Built his own house, preached in bars, streets, ministered to everybody sick, poor, Native Americans, Chinese laborers, sailors. Needed money, he'd go speak, sell his book about it, became a bestseller.
And the result in California.
Thousands converted, gathered into self-supporting churches. That phrase, self-supporting, the source's stress, became absolutely central for him.
And he took that idea global.
Yep. Toured everywhere from 1849 on, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
The sources really highlight his time in South Africa, 1866 to 68.
Right. Limited success with white settlers, but huge impact among black tribes. He credited his partnership with his translator, Charles Panda.
And South Africa really shaped his methods.
Definitely. The sources say he flat out rejected the standard mission station model, where the missionary becomes like the town boss, magistrate, supervisor, creating dependency.
And he wasn't big on formal training for local preachers?
No, he thought it made him less effective, the material says. His solution: give gifted Africans basic practical training. Send them to the main towns. Expect them to plant self-supporting churches right away. And then this is crucial, move on quickly. Let the locals lead.
Decentralized, rapid reproduction.
Exactly. And it worked so well in South Africa, he got invited elsewhere, landed in India in 1870, famously broke.
And he found the same resistance near traditional missions.
Yeah, the sources say he had no luck near the established compound, so he just struck out on his own. Big cities, Bombay, Calcutta.
Doing the same thing, self-supporting churches.
Yep, arguing they were just as valid as churches back home. Establish a congregation, appoint local leaders, move on fast.
Which inevitably led to conflict with the powers that be.
Big time. The Methodist Episcopal Mission Board back in the U.S. The sources detail this huge fight. They were mad because he was independent, working in their fields. But the real sticking point: his churches refused their money. They insisted on being self-supporting.
They didn't want dependency.
Exactly. And the board, the material says, fought him for 10 years, trying to force dependency, trying to control them with funding, even cut off missionaries who might have helped him.
How did Taylor respond?
Classic Taylor, according to the sources. Just recruited his own volunteers, raised his own money, sent them out himself, including the first Methodist missionaries to Burma. And he wrote like crazy, defending his approach, critiquing the traditional model.
What was his argument?
He went back to the New Testament, argued Paul's goal was always independent, self-supporting churches, local governance, culturally relevant evangelism, even pointed back to Methodism's own roots, how it spread through zealous individuals, local preachers starting self-supporting churches, not big institutions creating dependency.
He carried that same fight to South America later.
Yep, from 1877. Still wary of outside money creating dependency. Refused board control. Recruited his missionaries from holiness revivalist groups, maybe less educated, less polished, but crucially not too proud to empower ordinary folks.
And it worked there too.
The sources quote this Presbyterian missionary who, despite thinking Taylor was all froth and bombast, admitted, "The poor have the gospel preached to them." Result: 4,000 believers in Chile by 1906. A real movement.
But back in his own church, the Methodist Episcopal Church.
Admired, but distrusted. Too independent. The sources suggest electing him missionary bishop for Africa in 1884 was partly an attempt to maybe rein him in a bit, give him some official oversight.
Did it work? Did he change things as bishop?
Well, he kept planting self-supporting missions among indigenous tribes in Africa, Liberia, Angola, Congo, Mozambique. Found existing churches dependent on subsidies, tried to change that. But the sources conclude that despite all his field success, he didn't manage to shift the denomination's structural methods much in his 12 years as bishop. The institution was just too resistant. Still, his reach was incredible.
6 continents, numerous nations, partnering globally. The sources call him arguably the primary driver of Methodist expansion in the late 19th century. Even if his specific methods became exceptions later in Methodism, the material notes his influence popped up again in things like the Keswick tradition and Pentecostalism.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together now. We've got Nathan Lipok Kumar in modern South Asia, William Taylor back in the 19th century. What are the common keys here based on these sources?
Well, the big one seems to be this fundamental shift, right? Away from relying only on the trained pros, the missionaries, the clergy.
And towards mobilizing and empowering every single believer, making them the engine of multiplication.
Yeah. And that means challenging the old structures, the rules about who gets to do what in ministry, evangelism, baptism, leadership, planting churches, throwing those limitations out.
And prioritizing simple, reproducible training. Stuff anyone can learn and pass on quickly over, long formal education, which has its place, but maybe not for rapid mass deployment.
There's also this deep element of trust, isn't there? Trusting God, yes, but also trusting the capacity God put in ordinary people, not just relying on human skill or big institutions or money.
And the focus is always on multiplication, moving fast into new areas, empowering local leaders, and then, like Taylor, like Paul, moving on, not getting bogged down building centralized things that might create dependency.
Which, as the sources show, often creates friction, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Tension, conflict. We saw with Taylor and the board, the attacks on Nathan and Kumar. When you challenge power structures, funding models, the status quo, you get pushback.
But the scale of the need, those 420,000 unreached villages in India alone, the sources mention, it kind of makes the case for why these multiplying models are presented as so critical.
Absolutely. The core belief seems to be that the vision has to be as big as God's grace, not limited by what we think humans or institutions can do.
These figures, they really come across in the sources as movement pioneers, don't they? Working so that eventually they can move on because the work is reproducing locally, aiming for that no place left idea like Paul and Romans.
Yeah, equipping others to carry it forward exponentially.
So wrapping up this deep dive, when you boil it all down, what these sources seem to consistently show across time, across geography, is that the real power, the engine of these movements, it isn't elite training or huge budgets.
No. It's unlocking the potential God already put in ordinary people, and then actually trusting them with real responsibility, real authority to do the work of Jesus.
These stories we've looked at from the sources, they just keep highlighting these principles, don't they? Decentralization, real empowerment at the grassroots, rapid reproduction using simple, transferable methods.
That seems to be what allowed faith to spread so quickly, so deeply among populations that maybe the more traditional centralized ways weren't reaching as effectively.
So thinking about this for you, the listener, what might this mean? Maybe it challenges some assumptions you have about who's qualified for ministry or leadership.
Or maybe it sparks some ideas about how, really simple training and genuine empowerment could unlock potential right there in your own community, wherever you are.
Here's maybe a final thought to chew on, something these sources really provoke. If an illiterate street sweeper in India or simple farmers by a river, if they can become key players, launching hundreds of churches, just through basic training and being empowered based on these principles,
then what potential for multiplication, for impact, is maybe lying dormant right around you? And what might be holding it back? Maybe it's not a lack of gifted people. Maybe it's just our traditional thinking about who's allowed, who's capable, who gets the authority. Something to consider.